I would now request Shreya ma'am to kindly address the session.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much, sir, for inviting me and for your very generous and insightful remarks this morning. You're absolutely right, sir. Technology is and digital evidence is so much a part of our day-to-day lives now. One really wonders whether we use technology or are we enslaved by it. But I guess it's with those thoughts that we come to this session today, and to try and make sense of how we can better understand digital evidence. So I'll very quickly, I know some of you have met before, so you're already familiar with our work on forensics at Project 39A. But for those of you who I'm meeting for the first time, just to very briefly discuss what we do. So our work on forensics is aimed at promoting the use of scientifically valid and reliable science within the criminal justice system. And we do this through 4 different types of activities. Firstly, what Sir had already mentioned, our work which involves research, where we look at how forensic science systems in India work and try and provide recommendations to strengthen our laboratories. The next is our work on forensic litigation, where we're looking at different types of forensic evidence that comes into courtrooms and try and understand and explore whether they meet the standards of scientific validity and reliability. Next is advocacy through various efforts that we've done, either through our the commentary that we've provided on the erstwhile DNA profiling bill or the Criminal Procedure Identification Act. We try and engage with the forensic policy that is being built in our system. And lastly, capacity building, like events like today, where we engage with a whole host of different stakeholders, lawyers, judges, prosecutors, forensic scientists, defense lawyers, on different issues. So for those who attended the DNA session, you all know that I like to do a little bit of icebreaker by starting with a few questions and quizzing our knowledge on the topic. So we'll do that same today. And if you know the answer, please do shout out. Yeah. So does the digital forensics expert analyze the original data or a copy of it? Original? How many people say original? Okay, you're all incorrect, because actually a digital forensics expert should, and hopefully does, analyze only the copy of the evidence and not the original. And I'll come back to in my presentation as to why it has to be a copy, but they analyze only the copy. They're not analyzing the original hardware. Like for instance, if my phone has been seized, it's not my phone that is going to be analyzed. A bit by bit copy of the information, the data from my phone will be first made, and it will be that image that will be analyzed. Right. Okay. Next, can deleted data be recovered from a mobile device? Okay, that's very good. Can anyone tell me how this is recovered? How many of us know that?
There are some softwares that is available for where you can delete the data from the.
That's great. Yes, yes. So, right. So we'll get more into that, but yes, deleted data can be recovered. Can you remotely alter the data in a mobile device? Yes or no?
Yes.
Absolutely right. An IMEI number is unique to a SIM card, a memory card, or a mobile device. Absolutely right. And a dual SIM phone will have how many IMEI numbers? How many say one?
The number of SIMs.
Exactly. It will be, so a dual SIM phone actually has 2 IMEI numbers. How about a phone with an eSIM? Do we think a phone with an eSIM? How many of us have phones with eSIMs? Yeah, so do we know if a eSIM phone will have an IMEI number? Okay, so the answer is yes, it will also have an IMEI number. Yeah. Okay. what issues do you commonly face while dealing with digital evidence? And this is not really a quiz question, but I just wanted to get a feel of the room and try and understand what are some of the common challenges that you all face. So firstly, how many of us don't understand the fundamental concepts which are underlying different, okay? How many people have difficulty in understanding and reading the report itself?
Because we don't understand.
Right.
Naturally, because we don't understand the fundamentals. We
Yeah.
can't comprehend the report.
Right, right. How many people don't get how many people in their reports, okay, firstly, actually, let me ask, how many people have done a case with any kind of what you may understand as digital forensic evidence? Okay, so probably about 40% of us, okay. Like, can I just also ask, what kind of evidence have you seen? Like, how many have seen mobile extraction? Okay, computer hardware extraction. Okay, CDR evidence, call data records. So I believe almost all of you have seen CDR. Okay, any other kind of digital forensic evidence comes to mind? CCTV evidence. How many people have seen CCTV? Okay, that's also almost all. Any others?
Cloud backup.
Cloud backup. How many have seen cloud backup? Yes. Okay, right. So not a few of you only. Right. Yeah, next I just wanted to know how many people know the digital forensic software that was used. Is that mentioned in your reports, the software that is used to analyze? How many say yes? Very few. Okay, how many know? Right, so you don't know even the software. How many have tried asking for the underlying raw data or the actual images that was created? And did the three of you, did any of you get the actual copy? You did?
Pending before the court.
Pending before the court. Okay, right. Okay, so yeah, we'll just get started with what is digital forensics, right? So digital forensics, of course, is an umbrella term nested within what we understand as forensic evidence. There are different types of digital forensic disciplines, but broadly speaking, when we are referring to the term digital forensics, it means the process of identifying and collecting digital evidence from any kind of medium, right? So this could be basically a device, which is obviously a hardware. It could be information which is stored in the cloud, right? Or it could be information which is stored in different types of networks. And here what you see are just the different sub-disciplines that are within digital forensics. So what we are most familiar with is of course mobile forensics, which is collecting and acquiring information available from mobile phones. But what we may also be aware of is computer forensics, in taking that information from computer devices, as well as a lot of the things that we see and we use on a day-to-day basis. The IoT devices that we have in our phone, that we have in our homes, right, like Alexa or Google Home. These are also devices that are capturing a lot of data and information about us, and they can also be very useful in forensic investigation. Then we of course have information which is being stored on cloud, and I believe all of us here who have a mobile phone will have some sort of information or the other which is stored on the cloud. So cloud forensics has become increasingly important. It's no longer just about retrieving information which is there on hardware seized from individuals, but also knowing the information and tracing the information about that individual, which will be stored in different type of cloud accounts, right? Be it your Google Drive, be it Dropbox, be it information which is on your different type of social media accounts, right? All of that is also something which is becoming increasingly important. And then you have live forensics, which is basically all of your hardware, right, will have two types of memories. One which is known as volatile memory and non-volatile memory. So volatile memory is going to be something that if in case you switch off that particular device, then that information is then erased. So this will be information which is like how many people have heard the word cache information, right? Yeah, so all of that, when you're browsing internet, there are different cache and cookies that are being stored by your browser. Like for instance, it will include your passwords, it will include your face scans, etc., which make it much easier for you to access certain information, right? So all of this information is volatile information, and if that device that you have switches off, then that information will also be wiped off. This will also include information like when was the last time that particular device was accessed. And this, as you can imagine, also becomes very important, because in a forensic evidence case where we are talking about where access to information and when a particular piece of information was accessed and last modified, that can we can imagine various scenarios where that would be a relevant piece of information. So it's therefore very important to also store and retrieve the volatile, the data which is stored in volatile memory in our devices. The different type of sources from which digital evidence can be retrieved is displayed here. So of course, we've talked about some of that already: laptops, computers, emails, multimedia, SIM cards, HDD, so the hard disk devices, or solid state drives, the USB cards, pen drives that we have, flash drives, your personal digital tablets, logs and events, and these will also be on a whole range of devices that we use, as well as our browser history. So before we get into slightly more technical stuff about understanding how digital forensic investigation happens, I wanted to just take us back to some of the fundamentals that we should approach this topic with, right? So just like any other piece of forensic evidence that we may deal with, digital forensic evidence can also help us answer some very crucial questions which are part of a criminal trial, right? So of course the big question is that whether the suspect or the accused who's on trial, whether they have committed this offense or not. So the identification of the person is obviously very important, and whether they have committed that offense. But apart from that, the other questions that a criminal trial is going towards are in terms of answering when the crime occurred, how the crime occurred, and where it was done. And digital evidence can help us answer all of these questions. The other thing I wanted to share was that much like unlike other pieces of evidence, where I know we often are, as defense lawyers, we are often just engaging with the evidence that has been presented by the prosecution and providing our response to that. I believe that in the years to come, digital evidence is going to be one area where we as defense lawyers need to start engaging with a lot more, because it is here where you will find very crucial pieces of information on the basis of which you can build your defense. Now this could include things as obvious as alibis for your clients, but it could also include information like what was the behavior of your client, which can help kind of counter the prosecution narrative, or what were the circumstances around the crime that can also try and improbabilize the prosecution theory. So I think that we as defense lawyers need to particularly engage with digital evidence, because it is going to also be something that we should use towards creating our client's defense. Right, so the things that we'll get into today are going to include some very basic concepts on how data is stored in our devices. Now of course there are various types of devices, and the technologies that go into these different devices are very different. So it'll be very difficult for me to get into all types of data storage, but I'll try and cover some of the very fundamental concepts there. Next, it would be understanding the basic principles of a digital forensics investigation, right? And to think about what is actually happening in the lab. Lastly, I want to cover some of the legal aspects and the case law that is developed around for digital evidence. So, first let's try and understand the nature of digital evidence, right? Digital evidence, like other pieces of evidence, is evidence that can get altered, that can be damaged, and that can also be destroyed, right? So this is evidence that, sorry, I'm just putting up my notes. Yeah, this is evidence that that can be altered either advertently or inadvertently. So whether you know it or not, whenever you access any file in a device, you are altering its data. You're altering, so what you understand as data when you open, for instance, like a Word doc, would be the text which is written inside that Word document, right? But that isn't the only data that is useful about that file. The other data that is useful about that file is what is known as metadata. How many of us here know what metadata is? Okay, can someone volunteer the definition?
As attributes like when the file was created, who was the author, what was the space it takes.
Exactly. So metadata is data about other data, right? And metadata is also something that gets altered every single time that you access a file. So it's very important that we understand how susceptible digital evidence is. Like the same way in which we talk about blood samples being collected and whether or not they have been stored in the right conditions, taken to the laboratory following proper chain of custody and collection and transport mechanisms. In the same way, digital evidence also needs to be handled carefully and properly so that it is not advertently or inadvertently altered. Next, digital evidence is something which is hidden, right? So again, what I mean by this is that when you access a device, the information that you're able to see through that device, like if you open your phones right now, you'll be able to go through your messages, your photographs, etc. But if you delete a photograph, you can no longer, when you open your phone, you won't be able to access that photograph through your phone. You will need to use a forensic tool to be able to access that those files. Those files still remain in your devices, but you can't access them as a normal user, right? And so digital evidence is also something that is in the nature of being hidden or being latent, right? There is also another aspect of digital evidence that we should understand, that it isn't only evidence which is, like I said, user accessible. It's also information that is being created and generated by your device to store that information within your devices. So this is going to be, the term used here is file system information. And a lot of the metadata that is stored as file system information. So that is information that you may not, like some parts of that file system information you can access as a user of any device. Some parts of it you actually can't access, right? And you will need forensic tools to be able to access that. So for instance, to be able to know that how many other devices or networks have tried to connect with your device, you may not actually be able to retrieve that information as a normal user. You will need a forensic tool to be able to retrieve that kind of information, right? Next, digital evidence is time sensitive. What I mean by this is it goes back to the point of recovery of deleted data. Now, how many of us know how data is stored in digital devices?
Sectors of hard disk.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So there are, within any storage that happens in your device, right, there are different sectors that are being created. And I'm going to come to this slightly later. But basically what happens is that information that you get that is deleted from your device, that cannot be recovered, it's not as if you will be able to recover it at any point of time. You will be able to recover it only until your device hasn't overwritten that deleted information. Now, when is it that a device overwrites something is is a question that can't be answered, because devices store information in a variety of different ways, and it really depends on where the file system of your device stored that particular file and in what sector of the device it stored that. But basically, the point I'm trying to make is that this information can also be overwritten. And until and unless you use a forensic tool and try and see what is the deleted data that you can access, you won't be able to tell. There isn't a formula to know, can I retrieve deleted information until 2 days later, or 5 days later, or 6 days later, or 1 year later, right? There may be some deleted files that you can retrieve even 1 year later. There may be some deleted files that you can't retrieve even 5 minutes later, right? And so that, it really varies on your device. It varies on where your device, how your internal device file system mechanism chose to overwrite that information. And that is not something you as a user can control, right? Next, digital evidence, of course, crosses jurisdictional borders very easily, right? And this is something that we covered, this principle we covered earlier as well, that it can be altered, destroyed, damaged, created, modified, not from places and locations which are outside the jurisdictional boundary that you're in. So and therefore I think the kind of challenges that handling of digital evidence and examination and appreciation of digital evidence throws are very different from other kinds of traditional forensic evidence that we see. Right, so let's get into how information is stored in our devices. So file systems are they're basically an index that is being created within your computer or computing device, right? It is the internal instructions that your device has to be able to categorize where it is going to store what kind of information, right? And a file system also is, it's like, we remember the old time libraries where there were cards in the library where the names of the books are written, and on that it also mentions the place where you will be able to find that book in the particular library. A file system can be correlated to something like that, right? File system will therefore have an index of every single file that is created and stored in your device, and a file system needs to be will be there in every digital device so that you as the user can access those files whenever you open that information, right? The type of information that is tracked by the file system will be the location as to where that file is stored within the device, its size, the permissions of who the user of the device has allowed access to for that particular file, as well as other metadata, like when that file was created, who last modified it, where that file was created. All of those pieces of information will be stored within the file system. So I've just shown like a photo here of the different type of metadata that can be stored. And as you'll see, with every file, you can go and check its properties and then be able to retrieve the metadata about that file. So for instance, if you look at the metadata for an image, right, and what we need to know here is that metadata is created not only by the devices themselves, but also metadata is created by every single application that is there on your device, right? So for instance, if you have like certain photographing app on your phone, or you have messaging apps on your phone, they will also be creating different types of metadata and storing that. So for instance, in WhatsApp images, you will have information of when that image was first created. If depending on the settings that you've put in your phones, you'll also have information like where that image was actually taken, the latitude and the longitude of that image, right? And that is again some very useful metadata, because sometimes if images have been doctored, to know whether this file was actually taken and this photograph was taken in the correct location, you can go back to this metadata and check that, right? So allocated and unallocated space. This is again, something very important that we need to understand as a basic concept, because this is what determines how any kind of digital information is stored in any digital device, right? So there are two types of categorizations here. One is allocated space and the other is unallocated space. So allocated space refers to data that the computer is using and keeping tabs on, right? So these are all the files that you can open in Windows. And by the way, while I'm saying the word computer here, this is very much, you can substitute that with any other computing device like your mobile phone as well, right? Second part is unallocated space. So that is where space where your file system has now been given an instruction by the user that I no longer want this file. So the file system knows that this space is now vacant. New data can be overwritten on this space, right? So until new information and new data has been created, generated, downloaded onto that device, that deleted file will still remain in the unallocated space. And it is until this point of time that you will be able to retrieve that information. As I said earlier, it's very important for us to know that there is no hard and fast rule as to until what point of time you will be able to recover deleted data, right? And therefore, it becomes very important for us to think about the legal implications of this, especially in an adversarial system like ours, where, for instance, if from your client certain devices have been taken and it's been sent to a forensic lab, and the forensic lab says that it has recovered all of these deleted files from the phone. Now, until and unless you had an image copy of your client's phone, you may not be able to verify this claim as to whether those deleted files were actually there on your client's phone or not, right? And you can see why it is therefore so important for us to have access to all of this underlying information, including first and foremost an image copy of the devices that are seized. Right, now there are different places in which in a digital device that information can be stored. Of course, there is the internal storage, right? So all of us have phones now of 128 or 256 GB storage. Most of us would have that, right? So that is what I mean by internal storage, right? That so many gigabytes of information can actually be stored on your devices, right? Now this is non-volatile memory. So this is memory where if I switch off my iPad today, if I switch off my computer right now, and I switch it back on again, I can still go back and find that file, right? It's not as if that file will disappear. Second, random access memory is volatile memory, right? So this is memory that is being used by your device to be able to give you that smooth operating feel that any user would want, right? So as your device, as any computing device is operating, to operate that particular file or program or software that is running, it still needs some storage space. And that storage space is the random access memory. So that program is running in your RAM. And therefore, the higher the RAM, we would have all experienced this this experience when we go and purchase a new computer, right? Higher the RAM, the faster the computer will run. Now, why is that? Can anyone answer why that is? Because basically, more programs can actually run on that device, the higher the RAM of your device, right? So that is what you mean by random access memory. Now, random access memory is something that is very crucial in forensic investigation. Because it is here that you will be able to access things like the last time that this device was accessed, who accesses, what network accessed it, things like, for instance, the passwords that have been entered as the device was being used. All of those things are also going to be stored in your RAM, which is why a very crucial instruction that is given to any police officer when they go and retrieve digital devices is that if you are taking a phone, if you're seizing a phone which is switched on, do not switch off the phone and then seize it. because you will lose all the information which is in your RAM, right? And then you will be in a place where you will be unable to access that information once you switch on the phone again. Right? Next, the external storage. I don't think this needs much introduction, because I know we are all very used to using hard disks and external storage devices, so that's what that would mean. Cloud storage, again, something which we are all using on a day-to-day basis, and our SIM cards. Even our SIM cards can store a lot of information, including contacts, messages, etc. Now, what are the different steps in a digital investigation, right? So, firstly, it is the phase of collecting that information, and the next we'll get into analysis. And even within collection, there are different steps that have to be followed. Now, what I'm going to share in the next 6-7 slides is actually from this report, the National Institute of Standards and Technology in the US. They are, and again, for those of you who attended the DNA session, you'd remember that I'd shared the NIST report on DNA mixture interpretation as well. So NIST, as I'd mentioned then, is doing a lot of, it's a independent scientific institution in the US. They do a lot of research across different areas of science, including forensic science. So they have been, for the last 3 years, been doing scientific foundational review to see the different forensic tools that are used across the country in the US. And by the way, what's being used in the US is used across all jurisdictions, right? So it's not as if the tools that we are using here in India are so very different from the ones being used in the US. So what NIST has done is to look at the way in which these software programs, these tools actually function, and to try and understand what is the way in which they actually retrieve information and analyze information. So that has been explained in a lot of detail and depth in the NIST report. For those of you who are interested, I'd really suggest to go and look at this. So the report actually begins by explaining in chapter 4, it provides a great breakdown into how information is actually retrieved from digital devices. And there are 3 main steps. Firstly, protect, acquire, and then ensure. And we'll just cover what the basics of that are. Right? So firstly, you have to protect the original data that is there in the digital device, right? And this is to be protected because you don't want, as I just mentioned, accessing any kind of device at any point of time alters different types of data or metadata within that device, right? And so you therefore want to protect the data which is there, which was there in that device at the time that it was seized. So that later on, we are not in a position where we are saying that no, this file that you're saying or this data or this piece of information, electronic record that has been extracted from this device didn't exist in the device at the time of its seizure. Right? So it's very important that we protect that, and forensic analysis is done only on the image copy of that. It's not done on the original thing, original device. Is that clear so far? Yeah? Okay. Now, protecting data differs, and what I'll also be doing in the next few slides is telling you a little bit about how you do this in mobile devices versus other computer devices. Because the way in which our mobile phones function is slightly different from the way in which computers function. Right? So with mobile devices, and also this information has been taken from the CBDT manual on digital evidence, a very useful manual that the CBDT came out with in 2014. So firstly, in protecting mobile data, you need to isolate the target phone from any network by placing it in aeroplane mode so that nobody else can then alter the data in that phone remotely. The way in which this is done, both for mobile phones as well as for computer devices, is by placing them in something called a Faraday bag. A Faraday bag is something that doesn't allow for any outside networks to connect with that device, right? If you recover a device in a condition which is on, right, where the power is on, then you leave it on. You should not switch it off thinking that let me conserve the battery, right? Similarly, with computer devices as well, you will have to make sure different ways in which you can put them out of access by other networks, and also that it's important that we know that even with different storage devices, right? Like now I'm not talking only of computer phones, but I'm also talking about other type of storage devices, that they are also sometimes now there are new storage devices that can also be connected to remotely, and it's important that we apply the same principles that you would apply to computer devices for such kind of storage devices, because the data in them can also be altered. Okay, the next thing that we do is use something called a write blocker program, right? So a write blocker program is a crucial piece of hardware or software which is used to ensure that the original evidence that is there in that device, that it is not altered during the copying process, and it will prevent any changes to that original data in the copy. We've all seen how photocopying happens, right? If a photocopier is not doing the photocopying properly, doesn't keep the page properly on the photocopier, parts of it may not get photocopied, right? Or it may be very light. So and what ends up happening in that copy will be that there is some error in that copy from the original, right? Now, similar logic, to avoid this kind of errors in copies, you use write blocker hardware or software. Now, importantly, you need to know that write blocker programs or hardware can't actually be used on mobile phones, right? So while you can use it on computer devices, while you can use it in copying external hard disks, right? You can't use write blocking programs on mobile phones. And so therefore the softwares that are built for mobile extraction are different from the ones which are being built for computer devices, right? Next, you need to acquire this data. First, once you've copied, you've ensured that you've used a write blocker to make sure that there aren't any errors that are occurring in the copying process, then you also need to get access to that data. And you do that by doing something which is known as imaging process, right? So you're basically making a bit by bit copy of what information exists in that device. And of course, depending on the device that you're dealing with, you will have different type of software programs that have been built to acquire this kind of data. Also, you can give instructions to these programs in terms of what is the information. Do you want a complete copy of every single information, or do you want copy of only the information which is user accessible? So even those kind of inputs and standards can be put into these copying programs. So the way in which you acquire this information, there are also like different type of methods that are used. So for instance, with mobile devices, you can do something which is known as a logical extraction, a file system extraction, or a physical extraction. So I'll just show you what the difference is, right? A logical extraction here, which you see in the left column, is something that is going to be able to allow you access to all of this information in a mobile phone, right? So it will be SMS, contacts, call logs, media, app data, every piece of information which is accessible to the user. Right? File system extraction goes a step further. It will also copy everything. It will also extract files which are hidden files, which are files about the file system, about how information was being stored within your device, right? And things like I mentioned, cache, etc., or also information such as passwords, etc., that have been put into your device. Even that is information that can be extracted through file system extraction. The next is physical extraction, and that is the deepest form of extraction from mobile phones that can be done. This will allow you to get access to deleted data as well. Now, what's happening today is that the way in which our mobile phones are, newer and newer models are coming in, what we're also seeing is that physical extraction is something that isn't possible on phones which are higher than iOS 13, right, or Android 6 phones. Above that, if you have a version of a phone, physical extraction is not going to be possible. The best that you will be able to do is a logical or a file system extraction, right? And again, you can see that the reason why this kind of development happens is because mobile phone companies are trying to make your phones and devices far more secure and give you that kind of privacy. But of course, it has a lot of implications on the forensic side in terms of what kind of information can be extracted or not. Coming back to acquiring data from computer devices, that is slightly different. So here, disk to image is something that you will be able to make a complete image copy. That's what it's called, like disk to image. Disk to disk would again be things which are like specific files which are there in the disk. So it may not be all files, particularly it may not include all files which are about the file system. Right? And logical extraction from a computer device would refer to when you are extracting only specific files from a device. You're not making a complete copy or a disk-to-disk copy of all the user-accessible files. So the point of introducing you to these terms is because you may often find terms like this in your digital forensic reports, that logical extraction was performed or a physical extraction was performed. So now you know what kind of information and how in-depth the extraction was done in your case. Right. The next thing that we do in the copying process is to make sure that the integrity of the data that you have copied. Right. Now this is done because, again, going back to the photocopying example, unless you, after you have done the photocopying and you only receive the copy, how will you know that the copy was accurate, that there isn't some part of it which was missing? Wouldn't you have to compare it to the original and then be able to satisfy yourself that the copy is exactly the same as the original? That is what we do in data integrity step, right? So here we are looking at something about the image file and we are comparing that to the original file. And this is by seeing the hash value of what has been created for your digital file. How many of us have heard the term hash value? Right. Okay, can someone attempt to define it? I know the answer is already there on the slide, but yeah. So a hash value is basically, it's a digital fingerprint, right? It's a alphanumeric value unique to every single file that is created. So for instance, even if you open a file and you make some change, like even a small character change to the file, the hash value of that file will alter. Right? So any small change to files will alter the unique hash value, alphanumeric value that is there, that is created, that is stored by the file system within your device. Now, what we do in the data integrity step is to compare the hash value of the image created and the hash value of the original, because you're not going to open that file and see every single part of it. And again, remind yourself that it isn't just about user accessible data. There is also metadata that you can alter. So for instance, if I altered the metadata of the copy, where I deleted the information about last accessed, or for instance the latitude longitude which was recorded for a photograph, right, that will change the hash value of that photograph. And then you know that it isn't the same file as the original file. So this is what we do in the data integrity process. Now, how many people have actually seen in the 65B certificates that are submitted in court, how many people have actually seen hash values being written? Yeah. Now that is something that should really trouble us, right? Because basically the point is that hash values, especially for computer devices and for storage devices, where you're using a write blocker program, because it's the exact copy that you're creating. In a mobile phone, I told you that you can't use a write blocker program, right? So a different, like the hash value that will be there of the image that is created will be different from the original, and that's okay, because you can't use write blocker programs on mobile extraction. But you can use them for computer devices. You can use them when you're extracting information from hard disks, from pen drives, right? In those cases, you should be seeing a hash value. And if you're not seeing a hash value, then it's problematic, because if you were to take that report to your own expert and ask them that, ma'am, has something been altered over here, they will not be able to tell you if some alteration has been done in the copying process, advertently or inadvertently. Right. So basically, the two type of hashing functions that you'll often see referred to are SHA-256 and MD5. These are very good hashing algorithms that are used, some of you may have also seen this being written, MD5 hash value or SHA-256 hash value in your reports. Right. As I mentioned, in computer devices, the hash value of the copied and the original data have to be compared to check the integrity of the data. In mobile devices, however, the hash value of the original and the extracted data is not comparable, right? Because you can't use a write blocker program. So the extracted data, that can be compared to the software that you've used for extraction to see if no changes have been made to the data, the user accessible data during the extraction process. That is something that you'll have to see within the program, the forensic extraction tool that has been used for your mobile device. After you've recovered all of this and you've verified that yes, the copy was correct, you're then going to start decoding this data, right? So you will go through, then the next few steps are to try and analyze this information and to interpret this information and then finally write the report. Now the different steps that are there involved in this, we'll go through that quickly. Firstly, we are doing a data recovery. So here, sometimes, for instance, the information that has come out from the extraction may only be the user accessible information. It may not include the deleted data. So an examiner, a digital forensic examiner, will also have to check whether there was other information, deleted information, that they didn't get in the first recovery, right? And that is going to have to be first carved out. The next is to navigate through the different that information that has been retrieved, right? And here again there is going to be terabytes worth of data that will be there, which will be received from your devices. So it really it's a big part of going through this information is to know how to navigate this. What is the information that you're actually looking for? What are the different types of information that are retrieved from the device? Because just by looking at the device or by opening the device, you will not be able to tell the different type of information that has been stored in different parts of the device. So the first thing is going to be able to navigate this by looking at things like the file systems, parsing through the metadata that is there for the files that have been stored, timestamps, file size, permissions, the file paths of where this information was stored within the device and who had access to that part of the device, right? Even those things can be very important. So this will be navigated through. The next thing is to try and identify and extract. If there's a particular type of information that I'm looking for, then you can do that by either through a very useful like keyword search or a Boolean search, which will be there in all standard forensic tools. So on the tool itself, if the examiner has been told to look for by the IO has been told to look for only on the images, right? If in that particular case, then they can go and feed into the program that I would like to see only the images. And the .png files or the again there are different formats for images, .jpeg files which are there in that device, and then you'll filter it through that attribute and then go through those images, right? You could also, for instance, if you're dealing with documents, you could feed in particular keywords and then pull out documents which have those words. You could filter that information through by who had access to that information or when that information was last accessed. So there are various type of attributes that can be fed into these computers, and then that information can be shown. Now what's important is that finally the report that you may see and that is exhibited also in court may not be the full extraction that is being shown. So a summary may be shown, because for instance, if the IO has told the FSL that we are from the prosecution side or for the investigation side, not the prosecution side, sorry, but the investigation side, we are actually interested in only looking at the images, right? The summary report that may be shown may actually only contain information about the images. It may not contain other information that could have been extracted or that would have been extracted depending on the type of extraction that was used. So what you want to do is you want to ask them for the full extraction that they got, the original extraction, and then look at that. Because you might be, as I said earlier, you might be able to improbabilize the prosecution theory by using other data that is there retrieved from that device, right? So for instance, it could be while a certain kind of compromising image has been shown to be in your client's phone, but for instance, if your client had prior conversation or communication with that particular individual in the messages and those weren't shown to the court, then that is a problem, which is why you need to ask for the entire extraction. And then of course, you know, you're analyzing this information and you're seeing what is the, what sense do you make out of these different assembled pieces of information, right? So here I just wanted to, before I quickly move into the law, I wanted to just showcase the different types of forensic tools that you may see referred to. Are any of these names familiar to people? Celebrite, Grey Key, Axiom, FTK Imager, Encase, Wireshark, Sleuth Kit, Dump IT. How many of us have heard of any of these names? Right, so these are some of the most commonly used forensic tools that are being used by our laboratories as well. And of course, different tools are for different purposes. It's very important to know the tool that was used in your case. It's very important to go and visit the website. Even if you just merely went to, for instance, Celebrite's website, you will be able to learn so much about the UFED program that they've created that is used, UFED Physical Analyzer or Logical Analyzer, and to know the different attributes of it, right? These are all also, by the way, all websites because these are all commercial companies. So what they have done, which is very useful for all of us, is that they've not only written all of this information in a very accessible manner, but they've also created many YouTube videos, etc., to know the different features of these programs, right? So one thing that I would advise all of us to do is ask what forensic tool was used, go to the website, go to the YouTube tutorials for these different programs, and try and figure out what more could have been done in terms of extraction methods on your client's devices, right? So before we go into the legal issues, any questions so far on just the, I guess, the tech side of things? I know a lot of information to take in one go, but and I apologize for having to go through it so quickly. But any questions so far? Any challenges that we have seen in our cases? Okay. So I'll take the silence to be minds at work as opposed to lack of questions on the topic, because I know, I mean, digital evidence throws up a lot of challenges for all of us. Quickly, what I just wanted to go through were some of the recent developments in case law on search and seizure of devices, as well as the legal requirements under Section 45 of the Indian Evidence Act and 65B. Virendra Khanna versus State of Karnataka, very useful Karnataka High Court decision on the way in which passwords can be accessed from accused. Now this was a case where the accused had refused to provide passwords to his mobile phone and email accounts, and the court held that courts can order the accused to provide this information under a digital search warrant. The IO must write which device. The IO must also mention like which email ID, etc., that they want the password for, and why they are ordering the decryption for this. So the reasons for this have need to also be stated, and of course the court is doing this and creating these safeguards in order to have some to balance the privacy interest also of the accused. Yeah.
For my information, this is recently overruled by the Honorable Supreme.
Oh, okay.
I just read the
Last week, okay. So I have not been updated on that. Right. This was in which case, sir? You're right. Okay, okay, right. So I cannot be forced to give away the password. Right, right. Yeah, yeah, right. Delhi High Courts are in a bail order in some case. Yes. Saurabh Banerjee. Correct, yes. But so I will get to that and then probably come back to this. Yes. Then, of course, there was Rakesh Shetty as well, which was decided by the Karnataka High Court, where the court had said that seized devices and social media accounts, that they're an important part of a person's life and livelihood. So the data in the device is required and not the device itself. Therefore, the hard disk should be cloned and a cloned copy and device should be returned to the accused. This is something that the Supreme Court also recently held even in P. Gopalakrishnan case, which came from Kerala, of course. And here the court said that the contents and data held in a device are electronic records, and that therefore they are a document, that the device itself is a material object. The court also said that a copy of this, the cloned copy, is a right of the accused, and this is important as part of their 207 discovery under CRPC, that we get the right to access all the documents that are relevant to the prosecution. In fact, in the Ponnuswamy decision, the Supreme Court has now reiterated that it is about having access to anything that would be relevant to the prosecution case, and not only something that the prosecution is looking to rely on. And anything which may help the defense, even that has to be given access to. So as we know that there can be so many types of information and data that is there in a device that can be relied upon by the accused for various different aspects. Therefore, it's very important that we seek clone copies. How many of us have gotten clone copies?
I've applied.
You've applied, so you're yet to, right. Right. The next is obviously the legal framework, and here under the Evidence Act, and here we look to sections 45 and 45A of the Act. Now, section 45 of the Indian Evidence Act makes opinions of forensic experts relevant. The case law under this, I believe, should be applicable, while we have section 45A, which particularly deals with electronic record. All of the case law under section 45, where and the seminal case law on this, talking about access to underlying data and materials, and that has to be presented to the court, and the reasons for why the expert, that the final opinion on the basis of which the expert has given their report, all of those reasons have also to be stated in the expert's report. I believe that all of this is equally applicable to digital evidence as well, because if an expert is saying that no kind of such data was found in a particular device, etc., then they have to explain how they did the digital investigation, what were the different steps that they followed, and also they have to provide all the underlying reports, which will be reports generated from the different forensic tools, and provide that to the court. Of course, I mean, these would be the way in which, like for instance, Celebrite is a very common mobile extraction tool. These extraction reports would look something like this. They're very useful to have, and it's important that you get the original .ufdr file in your cases, right? So that would be the original extraction that was done, and once you have that file, you have basically access to everything that was extracted by the digital examiner. So you don't have to only then rely on their summary report or the summary that they have presented to court. You can look at every single piece of information that is there. Also, original hash values of the files which are extracted, that will be important to see, and the description of the process followed, reasons, as well as the qualifications and designation. I believe this is one area that we aren't paying enough attention to, because many times examiners who are being notified under 79A, it's important for us to know why and what were the professional qualifications that they had, what was the kind of training that they went through. Sometimes, in our experience, we've seen that persons with just diploma courses, that they have been also given that status. Now that wouldn't be like the reason why that's problematic is because it then goes back to the rigor of training that they had and that they received, and it's important that we interrogate those aspects as well. Of course, 65B is something that I don't need to get into too much. All of us here know a lot about the need for 65B certificates and what the Supreme Court has said with Arjun Pandit Rao. So this is something which is necessary if the original device isn't coming into court and it's only the information which has been extracted in that electronic record. Then in that scenario, we will need a 65B certificate. One aspect that I just very quickly want to highlight here, which I think again doesn't receive enough importance, is that the conditions which were mentioned under section 65B under subclause 2, in that the legislation reads that computer device was operating properly and the accuracy of the electronic record that was that is accessed in case for some period the device wasn't running properly. Now, accuracy of the electronic record is something that in the cases that we have studied, we haven't really seen people kind of engaging on this, and this is one area which is ripe for a lot of litigation. The deeper we go into looking at the files that have been presented to court and doing our own digital investigation, the more we get into issues of accuracy and validity. And that is something that why it's important for us to think about this is because if there are issues with accuracy, here section 65B would then make this evidence inadmissible. It is no longer just on the weight of the evidence, right? This will go something to the heart of the admissibility of the evidence itself. And that's why we as lawyers need to think about and creatively think about how we can bring some of these issues into our practice. Yes, so of course, we've covered that. Just very quickly, seeing that my time is up, just things to remember from this, that forensic analysis of digital evidence is never performed on the original data. A write blocker is used during acquisition of digital evidence to prevent any modifications of the original data. That hashing is essential to ensure integrity of the extracted data. The different mobile extraction tools and digital forensic tools that I had spoken about. Please make sure that you are asking for the different files that are generated. Of course, the names of these files will differ on the basis of the different softwares, but for instance in Celebrite, which is something that I've seen in many of the reports that are presented, you need to ask for the .ufdr file. Rules of search and seizure that apply to digital devices, I think we need to look into that, and I'll certainly go back to the Supreme Court decision on this. I believe there's also another decision, Ram Ramaswamy, which is currently pending, where the court is looking at creating rules for how seizure of digital devices happen. Hopefully that will resolve many of the questions as well. Ask for the data and materials in support of the conclusions. Check the 65B certificate and check if the 65B certificate provides all information about the device, the different devices through which the 65B like that final electronic record was presented to the court. Like for instance, if this is the original device and I put a pen drive there, and then you put that pen drive into another computer and then finally make CD disk, I need to know both the make and model of this iPad, the make and model of that pen drive, the make and model of that computer. All of that should be written in your 65D, because that electronic record went through 3 different devices and the information about that needs to be there. Right? So that's the way in which we need to trace the digital chain of custody in our cases. Finally, this is the report that Sir also alluded to in the beginning, the Forensic Science India report, where we visited 30 labs of the country to look at what are the challenges that our labs are facing and to provide our recommendations for this, for resolving some of them. This report also has a very useful primer at the end. That primer currently is restricted only to DNA profiling and understanding DNA profiling, but we're hoping to, in a couple of months, we are hoping to generate more such materials, useful primers for legal professionals, and we'll be putting that out on our Project 39E website. This is a course on forensics that we had launched. I had also shared this the last time. It's a free course. Currently, this course, which is hosted on FutureLearn, it helps to explain issues on post-mortem analysis and medical examination in sexual violence cases, DNA forensics, bite mark evidence, and again, in the future, we are hoping to come out with more such courses, particularly on topics of digital forensics. And yes, finally, thank you so much for your patient listening, and any questions? Yes.
I'm Vivek. Whether routing can be discovered in the forensics.
Sorry, sir.
Routing, when a device is routed, so so I know means the values of the device would change because of the manufacturer's the features which have been given by the manufacturer, they are changed. But whether this can be discovered in the forensics or not?
Yes, sir, it can be. Yeah. So if a device has been previously routed, you will be able to discover that. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yes. My name is Naushad Ahmed Khan. My question is, in case the data is being retrieved from the original device and hashtag value has been obtained, whether in a calibrated manner that hash value can be managed at any circumstance, like after tampering.
Sir, managed
if it is being done by full calibration of the original data, like the hash value which is being obtained from the original one, and then there is a tampering, and that tampering is absolutely calibrated, whether the same hash value can be obtained after calibration.
Sir, what do you mean by calibration? Maybe
means once the original data is being retrieved from the original device,
yeah,
then hashtag is being, then software is being run, then hashtag value is obtained, right?
Correct.
Then accordingly, a particular value is obtained.
Correct.
In the similar manner, using the reverse engineering
Of the original
one.
Yes, sir.
Can the same hashtag value be obtained?
Sir, so the point is actually of hashing and
Yes.
verification through hash values,
Yes,
is
sir.
to look at the hash value of the original and hash value of the copy. You can't, from the copy, like for instance, if something changed in the file, either in the data of the file or the metadata of that file, if something changed during the copying process, then the hash of that copy will be different from the hash of the original. So from the hash of the copy, you can't go back to what the hash of the original will be. The hash of the original has to be documented at that time itself. So if for instance, if in your case, and this is something that just to share with you in some of the cases that we are doing, the hash was never written for a case which was done about 5-6 years ago. Now, if that has not been done and we don't know where those devices and that original device is currently, you will not be able to, even if the copy that is presented before the court today, although it is, it has been submitted and a 65B certificate was given, but that 65B certificate didn't have the mention of the original hash value and the fact that the hash value was verified. So today we will not be able to actually see whether it was that copy that was there and that was analyzed was the same as the original.
Okay.
And that does create a big problem. So,
Thank you.
Ma'am, you said three things in the 65 field certificate. One was the computer model. Second you said was the pen drive model. I missed out on the third.
so the serial number, ma'am. The serial number of the device.
Both device, computer and then pen drive.
Correct, yeah. So all devices will have a unique serial number. That serial number should be there, and it should be there for every device. Like for instance, if the final electronic record that is being presented came after that data had transferred through 3 different devices, then this information, the make, model, serial number, should be written for all of the devices.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
I have a very basic question on the tech side. So when a website asks me to accept cookies, and I accept it because inevitably I have to because I don't get access to the website otherwise, am I giving away any personal information also? Am I consenting to give away any personal information? And if yes, what kind of personal information is going away?
Right. So, sir, it will be different things like, so for instance, if that site is, depends on the kind of advertising, etc., that is being done on that site, right? It may be information in terms of what are, like, when you have visited that site, what it is that you are clicking on and what you're engaging with. Like that kind of information may be shared with them. And again, I want to take back to the notion of it. It's not always just about, so it's not as if you're giving away your password, because oftentimes people worry about like whether it will be information which is as private as that. It's not going to be that, but it is about how you access a particular website, right? And what are the different times and what are the different things that you have accessed or clicked on. So it may be also different preferences that you have put that you may want to that website will have access to. But there's always a way in which you can like deny access. Obviously, like most websites, they will provide the allow all cookies function in a bold manner. But with a couple of more clicks, you can always deny access to all cookies or only to those which are strictly necessary for accessing that website.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah. Yes.
The question is this, that you have malware these days.
Yes.
And if malware is actually exported to your device, and your device malfunctions, is there a way of putting hide information in my device got infected by malware? I'll give you an example. It's well known internationally. Stuxnet, you know about that. The Iranian nuclear reactor, it's stated, and no one admits it, that the Israelis and the US actually degraded the nuclear reactor by exporting a virus, which is Stuxnet virus. Now, suppose it happens to your device, okay? And someone says, I have relevant evidence in my device, but my device actually got infected. Is there a way of sort of establishing that?
Yes, sir. So there are ways in which, so for instance, there are forensic tools which will help you. In fact, one of them I've shown here as well. I believe it's Wireshark. So this can help you access the network traffic that is received by the device. Like oftentimes what happens in malware cases is that it is being put on a device remotely. It's not as if I am coming and physically interacting with the device and then doing that.
They use a webcam. They don't do it remotely.
Right.
Your device lies unattended in my office, in my chamber. Someone comes and picks it. So there is no internet traffic
Right. Even then, sir, I mean, then definitely you will be able to, I mean, those are the easier cases where it was installed in that way, because then the footprint of that is going to be like, if that device goes into forensic investigation, that malware will certainly be traced. The harder cases are those where you're unable to trace how this malware got there into that device and when it was installed there. Even that can be analyzed.
Sometimes the good case study must do, because what they finally discovered is that they were using Dhclsc, and the nuclear reactor was actually getting degraded or malfunctioning, and the Iranians never got to know that it was happening. So it finally collapsed. The centrifuge worked at a furious pace. So one of the concerns that nations have at an international level is, are you entitled to that? Because as lawyers, someone who perhaps sometimes do international law, is this your right of defense? Without invading the reactor physically, you introduce a virus and you degrade it. It's happened in India. It's a concern of the National Security Council in India, where power grids suddenly collapse. There was much written in newspapers that this was actually, an attack by a foreign nation. So these days, that's what I say. We are so much engrossed and enveloped with technology. If your industries don't work for even 15 days, the amount of damage they can do to your economy without an actual war. So, yeah, but lovely.
Thank you so much.
What an informative session it was. Thank you so much, ma'am. And thank you.